Amen. Tonight we're in Proverbs chapter 30. I have a Bible or a Bible app. Proverbs chapter 30, continuing on. And while you're going there, I'll recap from last week. We left off at verse 14, where he says, "There's a generation whose teeth are as swords, their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth and the needy from among men." We actually used verses 11 through 14 about the four different generations, about the ones who are proud, the ones who are pure in their own eyes, but they're not washed from their filthiness, those who do not bless their mother and father, but they curse their mother and father. And the last question we left off with is, what can you do? What can you do about people like this? You can pray for them, hope they repent, and let them do whatever they want, because they're going to do it anyway. And that's what he's talking about. That's the kind of people he's talking about. People who are just going to do what they're going to do, even though they know to do better. Verse 15, let's pick up there. "The horse leech hath two daughters, crying, Give, give. There are three things that are never satisfied. Yea, four things say not, It is enough. The grave, the barren womb, the earth that is not filled with water, and the fire that saith not, It is enough." Now the horse leech, you think about a leech, a blood-sucking parasitical creature. The horse leech represents people who will suck the very life out of you. If you've ever met someone like that, we've shared it before. There are people who brighten the room when they come in, like Toya and Jamelia. Come on in, guys. Come on in, guys. They brighten the room when they come in. And then there are those who brighten the room when they leave, don't they? All right. Well, the horse leech type people are the ones who brighten the room when they leave. So the horse leech is obviously a leech, a creature, parasitical, sucks blood, but it represents people. They take whatever they can get, and we're going to look at a couple of different mentalities here now, personalities and mentalities. They take whatever they can get, and then they try to get what they're not supposed to get. They take whatever they can get out of whatever situation, or out of other people, whatever, and then they come back to try to get what they're not even supposed to have. This also entails people who, when they're told they're not entitled to certain things, or they're not entitled to certain information, they start trying to figure out ways to get their hands on it anyway. They try to figure out ways, well, how I know I'm not supposed to have it, but how can I get it anyway? This comes from the give mentality. Give. I just want people to give. Even if I'm not supposed to have it, I want people to give. There are also those who want people to give to them, but they will not give to others. Now, we've met people like that too, haven't we? They expect you to give, but when it comes time for them to give, they're nowhere to be found. It's been said that if you help some people in need, they'll remember you the next time they're in need. You help some people when they're in need, they'll remember you the next time they're in need. Amen. Businesses know that this greed exists in people. Businesses. This is why they offer free stuff, because they know people will chase after free stuff. Free, it doesn't matter, free pencils and pens for the next 50 customers. They know people will show up to get free stuff. Now here, verse 16, when he says the grave, he's going to give us four things that say not, It is enough. They're never satisfied. Number one, the grave. The word grave here does not mean the burial place. The Hebrew word here is Sheol, Sheol. If you want to jot that down or whatever, Sheol. The Hebrew word for grave, as in the burying place, is Queber. Queber. Here, Sheol, even though it's in English they translate it as the grave, it's actually speaking of hell. Hell. Hell is never full. It never says enough. It's constantly opening to receive the souls of men and women. Isaiah 5 verse 14 tells us this: "Therefore hell hath enlarged herself and opened her mouth without measure." There's no limit to the reception of hell. Next, the barren womb. The barren womb always craves a child. A woman's body naturally tries to produce a child. Even if she's trying to not produce a child, if she doesn't take certain precautions, then her body's going to produce a child. Unless she's barren, it will still want to try to produce a child, but it's incapable. The dry earth longs for water. The dry earth longs for water. The earth that is not filled with water. Then he talks about the fire. The fire can never have enough fuel. Anything that burns, it wants it. So he's using these things not because he's given personalities to them. He's using them as illustrations of things in creation that are never satisfied, but it represents people who are never satisfied, who can never have enough of their own way. So the fire can never get enough fuel. It's greedy. It's like a greedy person. Anything that it can, like a person who, if they can consume it, they'll consume it, just like a fire. These 4 things represent people who are never satisfied. Let's go on here. They always want more, and usually more than they can handle. More than they can handle. A lot of times, especially people who have a tendency to want more than they have, for one thing, they're never satisfied because they're always thinking about what it would be like to have more. There was a study done years ago, and they asked rich and poor and middle class, how much would you need for you to be happy? And the average was about everyone, they said, 30% more, 10% more, 50% more. The average was across all classes was 20% more. Whether they were poor, middle class, or rich, everyone always wanted an average of 20% more. So what does that tell us? It's not your peace and your joy and your satisfaction is not going to be found in material things. Because you can be a millionaire, a billionaire. The mentality is, I want a little bit more. Verse 17. The eye that mocketh at his father and despiseth to obey his mother, the ravens of the valley shall pick it out, and the young eagles shall eat it. Now the eye that mocketh, let's talk about that first. This consists of things like rolling the eyes in mockery, or any other mockery with the eyes. Rolling the eyes, things like that. Anybody who's ever been or had a teenager knows what I'm talking about. Okay, but the Bible teaches, and teenagers, they can understand and they ought to know that God does care about that stuff. But adults do it too. Adults roll their eyes when they don't like something. God says about mocking at your parents specifically here. He makes it clear there is a judgment for that. Now he uses ravens and eagles eating the eyes to illustrate that he will judge people for the way they treat their parents, especially. That's one of the 10 Commandments, isn't it? Honor your father and mother. It's the 5th, if I'm not mistaken. Honor your father and your mother. Let's go on. Proverbs 30, verse 18. There be 3 things which are too wonderful for me, yea, 4 which I know not. The way of an eagle in the air, the way of a serpent upon a rock, the way of a ship in the midst of the sea, and the way of a man with a maid. Now Agur gives us 4 things here. Now remember, this is written by Agur, thought by most to be Solomon. A-G-U-R. Remember, we spoke to you 2 weeks ago that the Talmud, a Hebrew writing of laws and historical events, refers to Solomon by 5 different names. Agur is one of them. That's not in the Bible. He's not referred to as that in the Bible. It's in Hebrew writings. But that's why it's believed that this Agur who wrote Proverbs 30 is Solomon. So first of all, the eagle. The eagle. He's basically saying that these things I don't understand. The eagle, it's a large and heavy bird, but is able to maneuver very quickly with great agility. Eagles are incredible birds. If you've ever seen a nest of an eagle, they're like 6 feet deep. We're not talking about just a little nest in a little oak tree, okay? We're talking about a 6 foot deep, by about 3 to 4 foot across nest. And they're very big, very heavy, but they're very agile. A serpent can glide across slippery rocks, whereas we would slide off. They have no feet. You know they have no feet, right? They just have a stomach. But yet they're able to slither across places. And he's saying, I don't understand how they can do that with no feet under them. Thirdly, a ship in the sea. Now, if you've ever been on a ship, then this will make more sense to you. I know my wife has, maybe some of you have. A ship in the sea can lean back and forth so far it looks like and feels like it's going to tip over. It looks and feels like it's going to tip over. And then it rocks back upright and continues plowing through the waves. It's like he's saying, I can't understand how that happens. Now, he understood the counterballast underneath and all that, but he doesn't understand that the way that it's able to do that. It's an incredible experience, by the way. I remember I've been on 3 ships whenever I was in the military, and one of them was a small ship, and we hit some hardcore choppy waters in the southern Philippine Islands, and doing quote-unquote humanitarian efforts, and it hit some major waves, and it was crazy. I mean, there are times they just tell you, go to the wreck, get in the bed, don't get out, because you're going to fall, bust your head. We'll bring you food. You try to eat. They close the dining facility down because you can't have food on the table when the boat's doing this number. Once you get used to it, it just puts you to sleep. It's fun. And you got some crazies out there who try to go outside and hold onto the balcony and ride the waves. Whoever those people are. All right, let's go on. Fourthly. And then you realize I better get back inside before I get thrown overboard. Finally, he says the way of a man with a maid. Now, this is not Igor saying he doesn't know what it's like to be with a woman. If it's Solomon, he knew what it was like to be with a woman. He had 1,000 women in his life. He had 1,000 women. But what he's speaking of here is the way that a man acts when a woman that he likes is around. Now think about it. This goes for men and women, okay? Men liking women, women liking men. He said, I'll never understand the way men act when a pretty girl is around. Now, this doesn't mean he was exempt from this. He just I don't understand what our problem is, in other words. Their voice changes. They all of a sudden start speaking a little more suavely, smoothly than they usually do. Many times their words change. Their body movements change. Mainly because their motives and goals have changed. And he's saying there, I don't understand what makes men and women do that. Okay, he's speaking of men because men are more prone because we are typically by nature, men are typically the ones who go out to get a woman, okay, usually. So he's saying, I don't understand what the problem, I don't understand what makes us do that. It's like I say, I don't understand. I mean, a pretty girl comes around, all of a sudden we become a different person. So he's like, I don't understand these things. But when you see these things happening, pay attention. Because if it's happening around you, pay attention. He or she may not be right for you. But it also makes for good entertainment if you see someone else doing it. If you're watching people, it makes for good entertainment. All right, verse 20. Because you're like, that's not the way they normally talk. All right, number 20, verse 20. Now he talks about the women. We just talked about the man. Such is the way of an adulterous woman. She eateth and wipeth her mouth and saith, I have done no wickedness. Now this also can go both ways. When a man or a woman is adulterous in their hearts, they're not looking for long-term relationships, such as marriage. They're looking for short-term pleasure. Now, adulterous in their heart. This doesn't mean it's wrong to find someone attractive, but adulterous in the heart is something totally different, isn't it? They're not looking for long-term, they're looking for short-term. And by the way, just because people go to church doesn't mean that they're altogether pure. There are people who go to church for the wrong reasons. When this is in the heart of someone, adultery, when it's in the heart of someone, it's easy for them to say things like, I've done no wickedness. I've done nothing wrong. Because they've already made it okay in their heart. When you make something okay in your heart, it's not long before the body follows. See, when you see people do things seemingly outrageous, bodily, I'm saying, understand they were already there in their minds. Your heart, your mind is your heart. Here's a quote for you. When it comes to sin, bodily actions take place long after it was already committed in the heart. Bodily actions take place long after it was already committed. Jesus said, if you Lust after a woman, you've already committed adultery. He's not talking about the physical act. He's saying the process has already started. The process. And because Jesus understood something. He understood that people like to justify and make excuses. What do people think? Well, as long as I'm not right there in the act, it's not happening. Jesus said it's already started. It's already started. So the adulterous woman, the adulterous man, if it's in the heart, they're going to make it okay. They say things like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Or as this woman here says, I've done no wickedness. Verse 21. For 3 things the earth is disquieted, and for 4 which it cannot bear. For a servant when he reigneth, and a fool when he is filled with meat. For an odious woman when she is married, and an handmaid that is heir to her mistress. I'm using the King James Version in case you have a different version, which is fine here. We'll just use King James for the original English translation. For an odious woman when she's married, and an handmaid that is heir to her mistress. Now the word disquieted here means to be made afraid. 3 things the earth is made afraid. The earth is aware of. First, he says, a servant when he reigneth. Now this speaks to us today in only part of the way it spoke then. Because nowadays we don't really deal with servants and masters and things of that nature. Not that God ordained or sanctioned slavery type stuff like in American history. We're not talking about that. But he did allow servanthood, and the master was obligated by God to take care of his servant as if they were family. As if they were family. So there's no biblical allowance for slavery and such things as that. Just to clarify that if you've ever heard that. A servant when he reigneth. First, this speaks of someone who carries a self-centered follower's mentality, but they've been placed in leadership position. Now you're going to hear me here in a moment teach about the leader versus follower. Don't get lost in that. Don't get lost at, just because you're not a manager at work or an NCO or a business owner, don't think it doesn't apply. You don't have to have rank and position. You've heard me teach this. You don't have to have rank and position to be a leader. A leader is a mentality. You can be a leader and be the lowest person on the totem pole at your job. Because leadership is mentality. It is not position. Not at all. I've seen some great leaders who are E2s, E3s in the military when I worked with them, or entry-level employees when I was working with civilians. I've seen some managers, high-ranking managers, NCOs and officers. Maybe you have too. Terrible leaders. Leadership is not rank and position. It's mentality. Anyone can be a good leader. So when I say leaders and followers, don't get lost in the words, okay? It applies to all of us. Here he's talking about servants, but we're going to apply it to employees, okay? Employees. We're going to apply it to anyone who's under someone else's authority. So this speaks of someone who is self-centered, but they've been placed in leadership position. They carry the mentality of, quote, now I'm the one who calls the shots. Watch out for people who talk like that. Finally, now I'm the one who gets to tell people what to do. So I'm going to give you some differences here, and I call them follower mentality and leader mentality. Again, don't think in terms of positions and ranks and all of that. We're talking mentalities here. Okay, I'm a teacher and I'm a mentor also, so I teach mentalities here, not just position and rank. Because that's who he's talking about here. The servant who reigneth when he reigneth. Now, let me qualify something else. That doesn't mean that everyone who gets promoted is not going to be good in their position. He's talking about someone who is already a terrible person and they get promoted. They have what I will call a follower mentality because he's using the word servant. So the follower mentality thinks and lives based on their own conveniences and comforts. They think and they live based on their own convenience and comfort. The leader will inconvenience themselves so as not to inconvenience others. They'll inconvenience themselves so as not to inconvenience others. Now, let me ask you a question. You can answer it to yourself. You don't have to answer it to me. Can you show leadership? Some of us here have gotten a ride from people at some point, either tonight or other times in our lives. Can you show good leadership by being somewhere on time for someone to pick you up? That's right. I said, yes, right? That's good leadership. Why? Because you're managing yourself. You've committed yourself to ride, or you've committed them to pick you up, however you look at it. You being there on time is a form of leader mentality. Okay, I'm using something simple for a reason. I don't know anything. I don't know if Brother Anthony picked up the two brothers tonight. I'm not saying they were running late. I don't have any knowledge on this using teaching. To show you, it's a lot simpler than we think. It's a lot simpler than we think. Let's go on before I get in trouble. All right, let's go on here. The follower mentality. Servant mentality. Now, when I say servant, don't think in terms of good servant like Jesus tells us to be a servant. No, I'm not talking about that. We're talking about self-centered, following type people, employees. You may know them as your fellow E3 at work, or your fellow cashier at work, or your fellow employee. This person complains about how and why things are done as they are. They're always complaining. Now, this is easy. I have here in parentheses, this is easy when you're not the one making decisions. Okay? I tell people, look, people want promotion, but they don't want accountability. Anyone who's ever held any kind of leadership position realizes things look different on the other side. Okay? When you were, a lot of us were military or around military, so I like to use military terms a lot, but, a lot of us who at one time were non-NCO and, E2, E3, we got to go home at 16:30, 17:30, whatever, but then we didn't realize that the E7 or E8 is still at work, or she's taking her work home, making phone calls on the computer till midnight. So we didn't know that. We went back and played our video games, and we were griping because we got held over 20 minutes. Okay? They don't even realize. Or the employee, the cashier at work, the employee, they don't realize that the store manager is going to be there for another 4 hours after closing. Things look different on the other side. So this servant person, this follower mentality, they complain about how and why things are done as they are. The leader realizes things have to be done a certain way for the good of the whole team. The good of the whole team. Just because they don't understand doesn't mean it's wrong. Next. How about I'll call it the toxic follower, the toxic leader. How about that? The toxic follower is used to getting off work at a certain time. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying you're wrong if you expect to get off work at a certain time, but that's how they live their life. That's how they live their life. The toxic follower, they're used to it. It's got to be that way. The leader, I said toxic leader, I'm actually speaking of a good leader here, realizes there is no, quote, certain time they get off work. There is no certain time because I'm now the one accountable. So we're telling you here about the one who's toxic, and then they become a toxic leader as opposed to the leader they should be. Next, the toxic follower, is more concerned with personal needs over the team's needs. Now this can apply to church, military, business, church, family. Family can apply it everywhere, can it? They're more concerned with their personal needs than the team's needs. We have what's called a serviceman's home as part of this ministry, where I teach mentorship and leadership principles to young single soldiers. And I teach them, not only am I helping them to become better future NCOs, I'm teaching them how to become better E2s and E3s. And I tell them that, hey, E5 is not where you become a leader. You become a leader when you grow up. Yes. Okay, leadership is not rank, it's mentality. And I teach them, hey, don't just lounge around and be lazy and complaining like the other E3s. Go find something to do. You're getting paid. Go find something to do. Show maturity. Because I guarantee when a slot comes open, if your leaders aren't too toxic, which they happen sometimes, I understand. I had a toxic leader when I was in, I understand. But your name will come up as someone who should be promoted early. So the toxic follower, more concerned with personal needs over the team's needs. The leader, more concerned with the team's needs than their own needs. How can I make things better for my team? In other words, they take accountability. Next, toxic follower uses words like, Words like I, me, and my. I, me, and my career, my rank, my promotion. The leader that they should be uses words like us, ours, and we. This is what we are doing. This is all for us. This is our team. On Sunday mornings, when you hear me talk about like the creative promotion team, you'll hear me saying things like, this is what we're doing. We were out there. This is our team, because it is. Next, got a few more. The toxic follower will use any opportunity they can for personal gain. This is why he's saying these things are bad. I'm giving you reasons. I'm actually putting meat on the bone for you. See, sometimes we hear and we read scriptures and we just blaze right over them. I'm putting some actual context to it. These are reasons why a servant, when he reigneth, is something that you cannot bear. The kind of servant he's talking about. They'll use any opportunity they can for personal gain. The leader they should be will sacrifice personal gain to make better opportunities for the team. They'll sacrifice personal gain to make better opportunities for the team. Not guarantees. Not everything that someone who's in charge, not everything they try is going to work out. But they give opportunities. Not every opportunity will everyone take. Not every opportunity that's presented in the military, at work, in church, by whomever is in charge at any given time. Not everyone's going to jump on the opportunities to be better or more involved or whatever. But they sacrifice their personal gain to make opportunities for everybody. Next, one more, the toxic follower. If they are promoted, they will use their position for personal gain. They'll use their position for personal gain. The leader they should be, if they're promoted, they will use their position to help and advance others. To help and advance others. So these are some comparisons here of what he means when the servant that reigneth. What's wrong with the servant being in charge? Well, if there's that kind of person, if he's this kind of person, that's the kind of person he should not be in charge. I've said before, I've taught him these things, because Proverbs has a lot to teach about how to be good leaders. There are some people who should never be placed in charge of anything concerning people. You've heard me share that. Maybe they can be put in charge of stuff, because stuff, you can't hurt stuff's feelings, you can't destroy stuff's lives, they're just stuff, it's just stuff. But there are some people who should never be placed in charge of anything that concerns other people, because people are more valuable than stuff. So these are some reasons why selfish servants who get promoted, but they remain selfish, is something that people cannot bear. Now let's move on through the next ones here. A fool when he is filled with meat. The end of verse 22. A fool when he's filled with meat. This speaks of those who are foolish and arrogant when they're poor. And then all of a sudden they get great riches somehow. It can be an inheritance. It can be winning the lottery. Not that Christians should play the lottery, but we're not talking about necessarily Christians either, are we? They win the lottery. You hear about these lotto winners who win the lottery and they're broke in 3 to 5 years because they did not grow mentally. They were not ready for it. See, more money is not the answer. Growth, maturity, that's the answer. Because with growth and maturity, you'll many times stop selling yourself short, and you'll stop looking for better opportunities when you grow in your heart and your mind. So this speaks of someone who was already foolish and arrogant when they were poor. Now they've got money. So if you thought that the loudmouth, flashy, and arrogant person was bad when they were spending their tax returns on more jewelry and a sound system for their 2002 Crown Victoria, if you thought they was bad at that point, when all they ever spent their tax money on was more rings and another 12-inch woofer, wait until you see them. Wait until they don't have to wait till next tax season to have money. See what I'm saying? See, it doesn't make you all of a sudden mature. Many times it will destroy people. Let's go on. That's why, by the way, celebrities, famous musicians die of things like heroin overdoses. Fame and money, that's not where it's at. Got to have peace with God. Next, verse 23. For an odious or hateful woman when she is married. For an odious woman or a hateful woman when she's married. This speaks of the woman who, while she was trying to get a man, she hid all her ill-tempered traits. She hid them. Let me say it like this. She really made him think she loved God. He really thought she loved God. He really thought she wanted to serve the Lord. Now, of course, this also can work in reverse, right? But he's talking about the odious woman. It can also be a hateful man. We know it goes both ways. But she hid these things, but now that she's got a man, she lets loose her tongue and her attitude and makes his life miserable. A hateful woman, when she gets married, said, the world cannot stand that. Proverbs 21:9 tells us this. It is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. I'll say it also like this. It's better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than with a brawling man in a wide house. So a big old house doesn't mean anything if you don't want to live in it. Now, of course, this is not a knock on all women, just those who refuse to let God work on their attitudes and selfish behaviors. It's not a knock on women. It's a knock on attitude, isn't it? It's a knock on bad attitudes. And he says one more here. A handmaid that is heir to her mistress. This speaks of when someone who was used to living in a servanthood position in life gets elevated socially. Yet they maintain the selfish servant's mentality, like the selfish servant we spoke of earlier. She maintains the selfish servant mentality. Not all servants are selfish, but we're talking about the ones who are. It'd be kind of like this. It would kind of like be the person who marries the boss of your boss. Like you get married to your boss's boss. Anyone who's not humble would begin to think that they are exempt from the authority of their boss because, hey, my husband is your boss. That's why, at least in the military, they separate husbands and wives who get married, fraternization and things, in conflicts of interest and things of that nature. Businesses sometimes do as well. I've known businesses that will not let a husband and wife work in the same business whatsoever, just to avoid all conflicts of interest. But it'd be like that. I'm exempt. You can't tell me what to do. My husband's your boss. See, that's what it's talking about. That person who is not humble. One example of this is Hagar in Genesis chapters 16 through 21. You can read all 5 chapters, all 6 chapters there. Read about Hagar. Apparently, whenever Abraham married Hagar, she started despising Sarah, her mistress. Her mistress was the woman she served. Today, the word mistress has a different meaning. A mistress is someone you're cheating with. But back in the biblical days, they used the word mistress to denote someone who was being served by the maidservant. And whenever Abraham married his maidservant Hagar, she became a wife, which in their culture was a status upgrade. And all of a sudden, I don't have to listen to Sarah.